a decade ago, I played the hell out of Dragon Age Inquisition, and I honestly loved it. It was pretty much a perfect game at that time. The first hints about what to expect from Veilguard didn't really thrill me too much, so I kind of ignored it until it got closer. And then once it did, I checked out character creation and all the choices and stuff they were going to give you, so it made me pick up EA Play Pro, and I started on day one. Anyway, welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today I'm going to talk about how I feel about Dragon Age Veilguard after, well, more than a dozen hours of play. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and let me know what you think. Let's get into this. Dragon Age Veilguard shares the world of Inquisition, but it feels very different. While you can do some wandering to find stuff in the world, most of the zones are not quite as open as the previous game. You tend to move through corridors, whether you're surrounded by trees or walls, and they guide you through a zone. Exploration itself left me wanting, to be perfectly honest, particularly since the stuff I kept finding wasn't all that great. It neither moved the game in any specific direction, it didn't make it easier to play, and I didn't find anything that looked all that cool. That said, I kind of have a feeling that the harder to find stuff is going to be interesting, maybe. Like maybe the really hard chests that you can't even get to until you've unlocked some power. Maybe that will bring cooler gear. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far yet. How long to beat suggests that the main story takes about 16 and a half hours. Well, if you do a bunch of extras, it jumps that number up to 60 hours. And then they claim that if you are a completionist, it might cost you 215 hours to do everything. And if that's the case, then yeah, the gear's going to get a lot cooler, and they honestly did provide you with quite a bit to do. I'm not entirely sure how much fun it would be to just wander these zones looking for chests, knowing that after you were done, there wouldn't really be any kind of challenge to face it. I haven't heard anything about DLC or anything. Maybe there'll be a new Game Plus at some point. I don't know. So max level in the game for your main character is 50, and there's a fairly extensive skill tree to play with. Each of the classes has 3 specializations, which seem to be quite different. You can be a rogue, a mage, or a fighter, and then within those there are the additional focus choices. So for the rogue, you can be sort of an archer character, there's like a gadget bomber type, and then there's a duelist, which seems to focus on your weapons. Your companions can level up to 10, so they have a skill tree of their own. It's a lot more simple than yours, but it still provides you with some flexibility to craft a party that will get you through any of the challenges you face. It's not all that hard to level. You can do the side quests, you do the main quests, you find stuff in the world, you get plenty of experience, and I was moving up pretty fast. So I don't even really think there's any benefit to grinding in the game per se, except for, and I'll get to that in a moment, the fact that there was at least one quest that didn't scale, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Character creation is fairly robust. You can modify your character in some pretty crazy ways. I started with a character who was insanely gaunt, and then I was able to make the cheeks come out and played with the nose and the eyes and all that good stuff. Lots of neat sliders. I have a stream where I did make my character, and you can see that on the channel. It's robust enough, I think, for pretty much anyone to get into. While the graphics are a bit more cartoony than they are realistic, it still looked good, in my opinion. When you pick a class, you also decide on their background, and this gives you some stake in the world. So, for example, I joined the Crows, which are effectively an Assassin's Creed ripoff. And just as an aside, you actually even get Ezio as a companion. I mean, he's not named that, but he pretty much is Ezio Auditore. Anyway, by doing this, my character knew some of the people when I got to that segment of the game, and she took some ownership of the situation that they were facing. So that was really cool, and it only got messed up a couple of times where she seemed to forget about her allegiance and made a more general comment about the situation. So it suddenly was like she took a step back from being a part of the Crows, and I don't necessarily want to say she disparaged them, but she was like, yeah, whatever. The quests themselves are laid out in a way that really feels like Destiny 2. You get some narration to break up the action here and there, but for the most part, it has that same feel of you start at a point and you move through a fairly linear zone. listening to the characters banter about the situation to help build the story, and then you'd get into a fight or do a puzzle and clear that area and then move on to the next one. I think that it's nice that you don't walk around too much. They pretty much do keep the action going fairly well. I think they paced it okay, but you don't really get lost very much. And I did get lost a few times, but that was mostly because I was trying to wander towards corridors that I knew weren't the main story, just to find chests or gold or whatever. And then I'd get turned around and end up walking back towards the beginning. But that's all on me. Combat in Dragon Age Veilguard is quite a bit different than the previous game. It's a third-person action game. You've got a number of choices, starting out with light and heavy attacks. These can be charged up to plow through armor and barriers. You've got a parry block system, and unlike a previous game I reviewed, it's actually useful. Though, honestly, dodging works just as well if your timing is bad, because the way that the parry works is you get an icon above your head, and you got to time it to hit that button at just the right time, and then you'll parry and effectively knock people back. There's some skills you can buy where you'll do a nasty counterattack, but quite honestly, dodging around seemed to work better for me, because then I was able to immediately attack and take advantage of a flank or whatever. You also have a number of powers you can employ by building up momentum. This is generated through regular attacks, and then you just spend them with your powers. I don't really know that there's much of a meter that you need to pay attention to, and beside that, you're kind of flying around throwing swords everywhere, so it's a little bit too busy to worry about that kind of thing. But you'll know because the powers highlight and become brighter, and then you'll know you can use them. In the assassin's case, I've got a power that I can throw a bolt of electricity across the ground, and it hits the enemy and it weakens them and does all kinds of stuff. And then once that's gone, you've got to build the momentum back up, and you can do it again. Now, I should note that if you take damage, it removes some of the momentum, so you find yourself at a point where you actually can't use the power, even if you had been able to a few moments before, because maybe a monster thrashed you, knocked you to the ground, power grays out, you got to build it back up. There comes a point when you can stagger an enemy, and then at that point you perform a finishing move. These finishing moves don't necessarily kill the monster, though they do a fair amount of damage. And if they don't die, then they are often knocked down, and they give you a bit more of an advantage over them. These look really cool, but the animations were pretty limited, so I saw the same one quite a few times. Not a huge deal, but it is kind of silly after a while. You'd think that they would have added a few more, knowing that you're going to do it so freaking often. I mean, how many times do we want to watch you plunge your short blade, plunge your big blade, and then rip them both out at the same time, exactly the same way? Maybe even just change the way the camera moves, because it does move when you see it. I don't know. I would have done something different. You're given 4 healing potions to use, and at the standard difficulty, the game's pretty generous with them. Even during a boss battle, there's these pots littered around the arena that you can go and grab new ones if you start running out. I have a rogue power where I can hit an enemy and cause them to bleed, and at the same time steal a potion and heal pretty much to full health for free. When the cooldown runs out, you can just do it again. And that makes combat very reasonable and, quite frankly, a little easy, especially since I build momentum so fast. The cooldown isn't that long. Finally, you've got an ultimate ability. It's where I get my Destiny 2 feeling from as well. After a while, you build up enough energy to drop a devastating power on the enemies. And for the rogue, she basically pauses the world, leaps in the air, and throws a whole bunch of bombs everywhere. Regular mobs are often decimated by that, and I've even taken a boss from half health to dead with it before. And it's pretty satisfying, but it isn't like super frequent either. So I'm sure that maybe later on, when you're in the 40s or even very close to max level, you'll have some means of juicing that up so you get it more frequently. But if so, you're probably going to devastate a lot of the enemies you face in the game. I could probably ratchet up the difficulty, to be perfectly honest, because I've only died once. And that was when I was taking on a quest that was 17 levels higher than me. Now, I'll get to that in a moment, but I did mention earlier that most of the quests seem to scale. I was doing random stuff, side quests, and all that sort of thing. But this one in particular was way higher, and the monster that you had to fight was so tough that I was barely hurting him with all of my powers. And he knocked me out in like 3 hits. So that was kind of weird. But beyond that, I really enjoy the fighting all around. It's fast paced, kind of keeps you in the action. It allows you to focus more on your character than the party. That might be a deal breaker for some people, especially if you loved Inquisition, since it was really cool in that game to take over a character that you wanted to ensure they survived a battle or that they used the correct power. If that was an expectation, then it would be understandable to find Veilguard disappointing. This reminds me much more of Dragon Age 2 than the other 2 games. Anyway, back to that super high level quest. I don't know why it showed up in my quest log. Nothing else has done it, but maybe it was supposed to be higher no matter what. Maybe it's supposed to be a challenge regardless of when you attempt to do it. I haven't gone back after achieving a few more levels to see. But the quests don't tell you how hard they are. They don't have a difficulty. They don't have a level. And that's where I got the impression that they were all scaled. But at least this one was not. Let's talk romance options. They seem pretty basic. You've got a flirt option in some dialogue. You can basically start down a path with a character. And once you get high enough with one of them, you'll have the option to become exclusive. I'm not sure how in-depth it needs to be beyond that. There is a bond system. So like I took a character out and at the end of the quest, it said my bond has grown with them. So I assume you have to build that up before the flirt options even really matter. But once you do get to the point with whatever character you are interested in, you can become exclusive with them and have a romance. So yay. I don't know. I don't really care too much about that these days. It's funny because it's in practically everything. Rogue Trader, Baldur's Gate 3, whatever. It's there. It's one more thing to do. And honestly, in a single player game, why not? Add as much as you can. Give people stuff to do. I don't know. It's not a bad thing. Now for the elephant in the room. The game seems to be seriously polarizing, like wildly so. I've seen people on YouTube say it's Game of the Year material, and other people are calling it an abomination. Some say it's the most terrible thing they've ever seen in their lives, and other people are pretty much okay with it. Metacritic has it at 83% by the reviewers, and users have given it a 3.8. I know there's some complaints about it being woke or something, which leads me to believe that it kind of got brigaded. There's some complaints about the art style. There's complaints about the play style. I don't know. I think that ultimately it's a single player game, and I'm not sure why people were quite so harsh or just angry about it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I personally enjoyed it right from the start. It isn't an old style fantasy game with tons of snark and ribbing between the characters. Actually, everyone seems to be pretty darn positive with each other, to the point that they are constantly acknowledging how awesome they are, and occasionally they even acknowledge each other's feelings. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There's even a moment in the game that acknowledges gender identity. And again, that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot of people who would love to be represented in a video game or movies, and it's just kind of strange that people even have a hard time with that. Now, on the other hand, maybe people had crazy high expectations. I did for Starfield, and I think that ruined the game for me completely. There's a lot of problems with Starfield, but in particular, I came at it believing the hype. And if there was a lot of hype around Veilguard, if people were watching videos and listening to the developers talk about it, then I guess I can see it. I could see being upset. Not the woke stuff that I don't pay attention to, but you know, this is a single player game with no multiplayer, no microtransactions. It's focused on a story. I mean, that's an achievement unto itself these days. They committed to that completely. They didn't make a live service game. I applaud them for it. Maybe it wasn't the most ambitious title to ever come out. I freely admit that it feels more, like I said earlier, Dragon Age 2. But regardless, I still think it's pretty darn cool. One of the things that I did intentionally was, once I sort of had a bad taste in my mouth for Veilguard, I ignored it until about 3 days before launch. And even then, I've only actually spent $20 to play it by getting EA Play Pro. So without coming into the game with hot expectations, I've had a great time. And as an aside, I wouldn't have been angry if I paid full price either. In fact, I almost bought it on the console to just play it on my couch instead of in my room with my PC. Because they offer the opportunity to play it on PC for only $20 by subscribing to EA Play Pro, I absolutely recommend trying it that way. I mean, even if you held on to your subscription for 3 months, you still wouldn't pay as much as the full price of the game. And by then, I mean, I personally will be long done with it. And most people who play video games with more than a passing hobby probably will be able to do so as well. Otherwise, I totally get that it's a hefty price, especially on the consoles, and maybe that's just not worth it for you, especially when you know that the main game's only 16 and a half hours. So unless you're planning on trying to find every nook and cranny and go for that 215 hours, it's probably hard to justify a $70 price tag. Go in knowing it's not Inquisition and that it's just an action fantasy game in the Dragon Age world, and I think you'll find it enjoyable. The game takes a good 5 hours before you're quote-unquote in it, so that cuts down on the opportunity to return it. 2 hours is not enough to really understand what you're getting into. I think that you're not even scratching the surface at that point. But however you try it, I hope you have fun. It was a refreshing experience this year. I've had a blast and I can't wait to finish it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video or found it helpful. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and drop a like. So what did you think of Dragon Age Veilguard? Did you like the Inquisition game? Do you think this should never have been made? Leave a comment below and let me know. Anyway, I appreciate your time today. Look forward to the next one. Bye now.